The following organizations have provided funding for this Into the Outdoors television series.
Hey, any guesses on what helps run all those vehicles and semi-trucks we've been seeing?
Here's a hint for you. It's a renewable fuel source made from this. Well, not the popped kind that people eat.
Yeah, it's pretty close, though. It's actually this. Yellow dent or field corn.
And today, with your help, we're going to decode the biology and science behind converting the stored energy in this into renewable fuels such as biodiesel and ethanol that help power America's cars and trucks.
So sit back and enjoy the journey. Next stop, Shell Rock, Iowa, as we head further into the outdoors.
To the outdoors. Grab your gear and let's explore as we discover the wild outdoors. Science, discovery is what we do. Into the outdoors, now what you waiting for? Into the outdoors, it's fun when we explore. Science, discovery is great too. Cool. You can make our Earth a brighter, better place by joining us in this wide open space. Into the outdoors.
Yo, Mission Control, we could use a little help explaining the concept of stored energy in a kernel of corn. We're a little busy navigating to our research location.
Yeah, I can see you're really slammed with that navigating thing and burning those renewable fuels. No sweat. I'll take it from here. Okay, let's start by analyzing the fuel in their tank. Most of it is made from ancient sequestered solar energy that was converted into crude oil millions of years ago. But some is actually modern renewable solar energy that's been converted into what's called ethanol, which is a type of biofuel that can help cars and trucks run cleaner and more efficiently. What's your definition of a biofuel? And what are biofuels used for? Now, let's start with the building blocks of biofuels. We know that plants, like corn, use solar energy in their chloroplasts, in their leaves, to convert atmospheric carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients into carbohydrates. You know, the starches and sugars that make up the plant. Ta-da! That's photosynthesis in action. And during the process, plants give off oxygen, which is vital to us mammals. These corn seeds, or kernels, contain 62% starch, 20% protein and fiber, 15% water, and 4% oil. And it's that converted and stored solar energy that they use to make ethanol. I think. But the real question is, how do they do that? Oh, just in time. Back to you guys.
We know you can't put corn on the cob in your fuel tank. But what properties make this a prime feedstock for creating biofuels?
One of the main ones is its starch content. So the starch content of corn as it comes into our plant is about 60 to 65%. Another reason is it's very plentiful in this area and it's renewable, so we can put it in and grow it within one season. So one kernel of corn of this size planted into the ground can multiply into 800 kernels of the same size. What's really unique about the corn, though, is that we're able to use every component of the corn, not just the starch. So not only do we make ethanol, but after we pull the ethanol out of the material, we have protein and fat and fiber left that all become components of animal feed.
First, local farmers deliver corn to our ethanol plant. Once here, we weigh the loads on large truck-sized scales and take samples of the corn to test for quality. Then, the trucks proceed to the load-out area and dump the corn into this underground system. Next, conveyors carry the corn to these concrete silos and steel bins. You mean to tell me that these things are full of corn?
Absolutely. We do have corn in both of these silos, about 500,000 bushels of corn in each silo.
500,000? All right, we saw the corn go through the grate and onto the conveyor belt. What happens next?
A bucket elevator takes the corn all the way to the top of the silo. And through the silo, we've got a piece of equipment that it's called a scalper. A scalper basically segregates the corn from foreign materials, like rocks, gravel, or whatever. So once it's gone through the scalper, then we're ready to feed it into the hammer mill. And in the hammer mill is actually where the corn gets converted into flour. So the hammer mill is a mechanical piece of equipment that converts kinetic energy into repetitive blows to the grain, to the corn kernel. And with multiple impacts that corn kernel sees within the grinding chamber, it basically converts into smaller, finer particles, which we call it corn flour. And then the flour gets conveyed across the street into our process building where the process of making ethanol happens.
All right, now that we've literally crushed the corn, let's explore some of the chemistry and biology that goes into making this into biofuel. Let's get cooking.
Thomas, you're right. We actually do cook our material as it comes into the process.
How does it start?
So corn, as we receive it, doesn't have starch that we can access for fermentation. We actually have to break down those starches into a usable format. We do that in our cook process by adding heat, enzymes, and water. Enzymes are the catalyst which jump starts our whole reaction. So we use two enzymes in our cook and fermentation process, and they are both called amylases because they break down sugars. The first one that we use in the cook process is called an endoenzyme because it only breaks down the sugars in the middle of a starch chain. But the enzyme that we add when we get to fermentation is called an exoenzyme, and it's called a glucoamylase because it only eats off the terminal end glucose. So this is what we start out with, pure starch in our corn flour, and this is what we end up with going into a fermenter, mash. Have you heard of yeast before?
Oh, doesn't that go into bread?
It does, actually. Fermentation is similar to baking bread. And yeast, to me, are the cool cats of the whole process because they are the workhorse. Without the yeast, we would not have ethanol. So the yeast are a living organism just like you and I. If a human body needs it, then the yeast need it. So we give yeast vitamins and minerals. Much of that comes from the corn itself, but we also add a nitrogen source in urea as the main nutrient for the yeast. They perform best when they're not too hot or not too cool. So we actually run fermentation at a very narrow range of about 90 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit.
So what do these little yeasts look like?
They're microscopic little single-celled organisms that are oval-shaped, similar to a football. But you need a magnification of 100 to 1,000 times to be able to see the yeast cells. After fermentation, we extract the ethanol via a two-step process, the first of which is distillation. So we inject heat at the bottom of the column and our fermentation material at the top of the column. Ethanol has a boiling point of 173 degrees Fahrenheit. Water has a boiling point of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So as we heat up the material, the ethanol vaporizes out the top of the column, and the water and the solids come out of the bottom of the column. So our distillation section actually utilizes 3 columns to make sure that we can get all the ethanol out of the process.
Good job, team. Well, so far. You got some serious questions to answer, like what happens to all that ethanol once it's made? And what about all that corn mash or mush? You better have the answers when we return. Stay tuned.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors. And now back into the outdoors.
All of this is really interesting, but how does ethanol get into our gasoline plant and then into gas stations across the country?
I haven't the slightest idea, but you know what? I think this guy might be able to help us out.
I think I can help you figure this out.
Thanks.
From those big tanks, we'll load it into a rail car over there, and then it'll go to a terminal. And at the terminal, they'll put it in with gasoline.
Told you.
And gasoline with the ethanol will be shipped to the gas station where you would fill up your car.
You know, 10% still sounds like a delusion to me. I'm going high octane when I get my first car.
And you should, because there's more horsepower in octane. And ethanol is a great octane booster. And what it does is it takes away some of the petroleum that would have the octane, and it puts ethanol in its place. And then that is used in the chemical industry that can make plastics and other higher value products.
Time out. What's octane?
Octane is something that they measure in gasoline to reduce knocking in engines. And ethanol by itself has about 113 octane, and gasoline that you blend it into has about 84 octane. Well, you need to get up to like 89 or 91 before you put it in the engine. So when you mix it together, it gives you the 91.
That's cool of what's going into your car, but aren't you more worried of what's coming out of it?
And a higher performing or better performing car will reduce the emissions coming out of the car. So ethanol does help with the emissions of the car.
I'm still curious about something. I mean, think about it. Where does all of that leftover corn mash go? It has to go somewhere.
Yeah, but that's why we have to discover the rest of the story. See Mount Everest over there? Let's check it out.
That little Mount Everest, that's just a little bit of what we produce. So this product, the way we load it out of the plant is to load it out in 2 modes of transportation. First, by truck, semi-hopper trucks. This truck product stays mostly in the domestic market, fed to swine, poultry, and beef. The other mode of transportation is rail cars. We utilize the rail cars because we can ship the product faster and further. This product will get shipped to the river, the Mississippi River, to be offloaded onto barges. The barges then float down the Mississippi to be loaded onto large Panamax vessels that are shipped to China, Japan, Asia. We also will ship rail cars into Chicago to offload the rail cars into containers that we ship to Southeast Asia, primarily Vietnam, Korea, Thailand. Again, all of this product is a very nutritious product for animal feed, high in protein, energy, and fiber.
Whoa, so you really are helping feed the world.
Yeah, but all of this is dry. Didn't we see mash earlier? How to get from that mushy goo to this dry stuff?
We gotta get that dried down in order to transport it.
Okay.
In order to do that, we further process the mash to remove a lot of the water, and then we send it through 2 sets of dryers to dry it down into a 12% moisture product.
No way, can we see it?
Yeah, we can see it, but it's really hot, so we're gonna make it a quick trip.
Oh, sweet. See, the amazing corn kernel not only helps to power our vehicles, it also helps to feed the world.
That's a twofer. 2 different uses from the same thing, making ethanol and feeding livestock and other animals. I guess we're done with this assignment.
Hang on, guys. There's another product that we produce from the corn kernel. It's called distiller's corn oil.
What? I thought we were done here. Mission Control, what's going on?
Well, that's a wrap for you guys in Iowa. But Team B is heading to Beatrice, Nebraska to find out how they use distiller's corn oil to make another type of biofuel. Now, if you were paying attention, you may have noticed something else very important that they create alongside with ethanol and distiller's grain. Any guesses?
Have you noticed anything today about the people working here? Women in the biofuel industry using science and engineering have gotten so far in this line of work. Anyone can do it. They just have to work hard and continue studying.
And who knows? Maybe someday you could have a career in creating biofuels or help feed society. Stay tuned as we explore other ways to create biofuel.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors. And now back into the outdoors.
So we've already used the starch in that corn to make ethanol and distiller's grain for animal feed. Plus, we still got this stuff left.
And they're supposed to turn that into high-quality biodiesel fuel? That's gotta be tricky.
No tricks, just serious science and technology. That's what we're supposed to discover here.
We've just got to figure out how they get this stuff into biodiesel. What's our first step?
So we use that corn oil as a feedstock to make biodiesel that goes in diesel engines, much like this truck here.
What's so special about biodiesel?
You know, biodiesel is a renewable fuel. It's made from vegetable oils and other things like used cooking oil. So it's a renewable fuel. And the other thing about it is it improves lubricity in the diesel engines, as well as reduces greenhouse gas emissions.
You know, David, it sounds like a really long and complicated process to turn this stuff into biodiesel. Is it even worth your time and energy?
Actually, it is. You know, biodiesel produces very similar energy to that of traditional diesel.
So is that the only benefit to making biodiesel here? Like, what about recycling?
We recycle corn oil from an ethanol plant into a feedstock to make biodiesel.
Where do you start? What's our first step?
Well, let's head into the plant. We'll start off with feedstocks.
So we made it to the lab to find out what other ingredients they use to make biodiesel.
Well, they probably use more than just this.
That's the finished product?
Yeah, that's the product that comes out of the end of the plant when we're done making biodiesel. Here, hold that up next to it for a second. So you can see the difference of what goes in and what comes out.
Wow. Well, what other things do you use to make that crystal clear biodiesel?
This is used cooking oil. When you go to the fast food restaurant, this is what would come out of the French fry fryer after they've made your fries. And this is brown grease. This is just like that used cooking oil, except another plant has taken the best part of the highest quality oil off, and this is what's left. Looks like chocolate, right? But we can make biodiesel out of it.
Ah, cool.
And this is tallow.
Animal tallow?
What's tallow?
Tallow is from hamburgers out of cows. That's the oil that's left over.
So where do you get this oil? Does it just come from one place, or like?
All over the place. There's lots of different plants that collect these types of used cooking oils from all kinds of fast food restaurants and then sell it to us. We can use any of this at this plant to make biodiesel. That's what makes this plant so unique.
Oh, I get it. So it's recycling. All of these jars are used to make...
Sorry to interrupt you guys chewing the fat, but I've got incoming feeds from students wanting to know about the innovations and technology behind all this. Can't you get to that part? We're running a little low on time.
I'm taking a backseat. The music is pumping louder.
So we just got back from the lab where we learned about all the different types of feedstock that they use in making biodiesel.
Well, I still don't understand how they turn this into biodiesel.
It's actually quite simple. The first part of the process is to remove all of the impurities in the feedstock. So you saw some of the other feedstocks in the lab that we have. So our first step of the process is to remove those impurities so we can actually get a cleaner oil to make fuel out of. So after impurities are removed from the oil, we mix oil and methanol and heat it up. And then we send it to our process. Our process is unique because we've combined two reactions into one reactor. There are multiple components in the feedstock that we want to turn into biodiesel. Our reactors have catalyst in them that when you mix the feedstock with methanol and run it over the catalyst, it will turn both of those components into biodiesel. The oil and methanol that are already hot meet on the surface of that catalyst, and then our reactions happen, transesterification and esterification. And we do all of that in one step, which makes our plant more cost efficient and more energy efficient. A traditional plant would use multiple pieces of equipment for it, where we only do it with one.
So what about the stuff that's left over from this process?
Oh, you mean the co-products?
Sure.
Well, I can tell you about them, but I think it'd be a lot more fun to go see.
Whoa, now we gotta slow down the flow of technology. Ease up, you guys. My head's spinning and all the flow modulators are overheating. Whew. When we return, we'll decode the rest of this biofuel story.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors.
And now back into the outdoors.
Hey, did you ever see the movie Back to the Future 2? What about that part where Doc Brown takes leftover food, puts it in his car, and converts it into fuel? Well, it looks like the future is here right now, as these scientists and engineers are taking garbage and food waste and turning it into real biodiesel fuel. And that technology they're using is paving the way into the future of biofuels. Oops, time to get back to all that technology.
So this is the final step to the biodiesel production process. It's called the vacuum distillation unit. In the vacuum distillation unit, we remove all of the material that we didn't convert to biodiesel. Pressure inside of that column is actually much less than what we're feeling right now on the outside. It's actually just barely above what you would feel in outer space. So our reaction mixture goes in as a liquid and gets vaporized inside the column, and the impurities go to the bottom and the biodiesel goes out to the top. This is one of the main reasons why our biodiesel is so clear.
Why is the vacuum important in this process?
Well, the vacuum is important because it actually lowers the boiling point of the liquid.
Why lower the boiling point?
We want to lower the boiling point because we want the liquid to boil before we actually degrade it by applying too much heat.
You mentioned the co-products of this process. Anything else that comes out?
So actually, when we create biodiesel out of fats, a co-product of that is glycerin. And glycerin is separated. It's actually a liquid separation. So what we do is we take our reaction mixture, slow it down, and the glycerin will separate itself. It will move to the bottom of the tank, and the biodiesel and mixture will move to the top. So what we can do is just drain the glycerin out of the bottom and push the biodiesel out of the top, and that's how we get that separation. So glycerin can either be used by itself or it can be turned into different products. So one example of it being used by itself is in toothpaste. The sweetener in toothpaste is glycerol, which is a component to our glycerin.
So we started out with all of these feedstocks, including this distiller's corn oil and this dirty cooking grease. And after we removed all the impurities that make up the co-products of this plant, we got biodiesel. And there you have it, the complete story.
No, we're not done yet. We still have to find out how they get that fuel into those diesel vehicles that transport people and products all around the country. Let's go.
Once we produced biodiesel, we store it in tanks, much like this tank here. And from those tanks, then we test it to make sure it meets our quality specifications. And it has to meet those before we can ship it. And once it meets those specifications, we load it in tank cars and rail cars and ship it out.
Well, how does it get there?
We make a lot of biodiesel here, so it is pumped through pumps and piping right across over our heads here into this loadout building, and then it's loaded onto the tanker or the rail car.
Then what?
From here, it leaves our site and it goes to a blending terminal where it's blended with traditional diesel.
Does it have to be blended, or can you just use it by itself?
You know, biodiesel could be used to fuel an engine by itself. However, it doesn't do so well at low temperatures. So for those reasons, we blend it. Another added benefit is less sulfur and better emissions for our vehicles.
So that's good for the environment.
Correct.
So really, we've taken this kernel of corn full circle.
Now you've learned the complete story of everything that goes on in that biodiesel production plant. And you know, all this talk of feedstock has really made me pretty hungry.
And look, fries that have been cooked in oil and that could be turned into biodiesel.
Yeah, you decoded the science all right, but you forgot one critical ingredient. It's real people with real careers that made all the science happen here today.
Into the outdoors, now what you waiting for? Into the outdoors, it's fun when we explore. Science, discovery, is way too cool. You can make our Earth a bright and better place by joining us in this wide open space. Into the outdoors.
The following organizations have provided funding for this Into the Outdoors television series.